Cleaning the body of a young man played to death by a rich woman, another corpse handler suddenly barged in. At first it was assumed he was there for the rich woman, thinking she wasn't done having her fun and had found someone more experienced. But unexpectedly, the rich woman didn't know this guy.
I'm here to take care of your...
Disgusted and still unsure whether the man was friend or foe, he saw the man point up at the pinhole camera above. It turned out that everything Ma Xiangfeng had just done had been seen by the hotel owner through the surveillance cameras. Worried that it would affect his business, the owner had called in the cleaner, Pitt, to deal with the aftermath. However, the rich woman had gotten to George first. Since neither side trusted anyone but the person they had called, they wanted George and Pitt to work together to handle the body. But for professional body disposers, this was an unacceptable stain on their reputation. Pitt grabbed the phone and directly refused the hotel owner's request. George, meanwhile, packed up his tools and prepared to leave. Even when the rich woman offered 3 times the usual price, he still refused to cooperate.
She needs to forget about me if you don't finish the job she's given you. A camera.
Pitt was also threatened in the same way. Although the two of them didn't think much of each other, they were forced by the situation to agree to this temporary partnership. However, when faced with the clothes the two had prepared for him, the rich woman was at a loss for a moment. In the end, she had to take Pete's jacket and then the pants George had prepared, and walked out of the room in a mismatched outfit, feeling anxious. After the rich woman left, George took out a plastic sheet and began his professional cleaning work, kicking aside the sofa that was in the way. He unfolded the plastic sheet and spread it on the floor, but just as he was about to move on to the next step, he saw Pitt holding a bottle of soda, drinking it down without a care in the world. This made George furious, and he immediately went over to question him about why he wasn't helping. Unexpectedly, Pitt really lived up to his name. He was truly thick-skinned.
My job is to make sure that you do your job, so that mess can't be traced back to this hotel. So you're just going to sit there and slurp your soda while I supervise. Fuck you.
George didn't want to argue, so he just kept working on the tough job at hand. Pitt sat there with his legs crossed like a boss, but when he turned his head, he spotted a backpack hidden in the corner. He unzipped it and couldn't help but curse out loud on the spot. Hearing the commotion, George walked over and saw that the backpack was stuffed with a large amount of flour. He instantly felt like the sky was falling. What made things even worse was that there was a tracker installed inside the stuffed toy, which meant the owner of the goods could find them at any time. Both of them were top players in the industry, so they were well aware of the risks involved. After a brief discussion, they decided to deal with the body first, and then look for an opportunity to return the flour to its rightful owner. Once they reached an agreement, George quickly sealed the package with a few strips of tape, then yanked up the bedsheet and easily finished wrapping up the young man's body. Then he pushed over the hotel luggage cart and effortlessly hoisted the body onto it. To make absolutely sure, George put a seat belt on the young man and finally swaggered out, pushing the body toward the elevator to leave the hotel. When they reached the underground parking lot, Pitt immediately cut the surveillance, and only then did George push the luggage cart and smoothly ram the young man into the trunk. Pitt raised his eyebrows, thinking this old guy actually has some skills, but how should they deal with the body? The two had different opinions. George thought dumping it in the river would be the easiest. Pitt insisted that burying it would be more secure. Just as the two were arguing and couldn't reach an agreement, the car's trunk suddenly opened by itself.
You okay? Or good? Yep.
Pitt slammed the car door shut and immediately accused George of being unprofessional, saying he couldn't even tell the difference between a dead person and a living one. But George felt wrong too. He insisted that when he checked earlier, the guy had already stopped breathing. In the end, the two of them came to the same conclusion. They guessed that the pretty boy must have overdosed on flour and fallen into a temporary coma. Right now, as long as they could wake this guy up, they'd be completely off the hook. They quickly drove to Chinatown and found a female doctor at a black market clinic. After a preliminary examination, the doctor said that the kid was showing signs of apparent death because he had taken too much. To avoid interfering with the treatment, they were forcibly kicked out. With nothing else to do, the two of them started drinking together. Unexpectedly, through this chance encounter, they discovered not only did they have the same profession, but they also liked the same woman.
What are the odds, right? Both of us sleeping with the same Chinatown doctor. Oh, you two? No way.
Stop him.
Sure enough, youth really is the greatest asset. Even after being worn out by the rich lady, this guy's stamina is still impressive. Fortunately, the two old guys aren't pushovers either. Just as the young stud and Pete came out of the alley, they ran into George driving straight toward them. George was scared half to death, but the young stud leapt into the air, drawing a perfect arc like a professional gymnast performing an extreme move, leaving Pete completely stunned. The key thing is, this guy actually landed smoothly, with such a coordinated and athletic body. No wonder he caught the rich lady's eye. The young stud took Pete for a long run down the street, and after just 3 minutes, Pete's kidneys were already giving out. Luckily, George's driving skills were top-notch. As soon as they got onto the overpass, he pulled off a stylish drift. They finally blocked the young stud's way, and after being dragged around all this time, Pete wasn't about to go easy on him. He grabbed the guy by the hair and tossed him straight into the car. When they returned to Chinatown, however, the female doctor refused to let them in. She was clearly speechless about what had just happened, casually tossed them a bottle of medicine, and scolded them to get lost.
Damn it. One of the small ones, every 6 and a lot of water.
Also, I'm not sleeping with him. He's just an asshole.
Yeah, she's screwing with...
Hearing this, George instantly felt relieved. After all, being treated as a backup was pretty humiliating. Neither of them wanted to take the young stud home, so they ended up dragging him to a small motel. But with 3 grown men sharing a single room, it was hard not to make the landlady suspicious.
Love, NASA, Arabian Nights, minimum of 3, Safari. I can do it by the hour.
He's not a prostitute.
The young stud nervously pressed his lips together, afraid these 2 burly men would beat him up. It wasn't until he heard the old man ask about the origin of his flower that he finally let out a sigh of relief. But seeing that he still had no intention of coming clean, the 2 men quickly lost their patience for gentle persuasion.
Lagrange, they call him Lagrange.
It turns out this kid is just a clear-eyed college student who only wanted to make some extra cash by running drugs. But before he could even get the address, he locked eyes with a rich woman at the bar, then mistakenly took the contraband for Viagra, which is how he ended up in this mess. His employer would send him the address via pager, and that already outdated pager was left at the bar where his classmate worked part-time. So, in order to get the address for the drug run, they had no choice but to head to the bar first. Unexpectedly, as soon as they arrived at the entrance, they spotted the Croatian mob boss, which scared the 2 of them into shrinking back immediately. Both of them had cleaned up after the boss before, but body collectors usually work alone. If the boss saw that they knew each other privately, chances were they'd both be done for. So they split up to enter the bar. The young guy went to the counter to get the pager, while the others stood aside to keep watch. But to their surprise, the bartender didn't understand English at all, and ended up serving him a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. The young guy was utterly speechless and had no choice but to grab the pager himself, but such a blatant move was bound to attract the attention of security. Sure enough, he was promptly thrown out, but at least he managed to get the pager. Seeing this, the 2 of them wanted to leave this troublesome place as quickly as possible. But just then, the atmosphere in the bar reached its peak, and everyone started crowding toward the dance floor, forcing the 2 of them back inside. Surrounded by the crowd and swept up by the rhythm of the music, they had no choice but to start dancing along. But they had barely started when the mob boss noticed them. Seeing 2 corpse collectors appear at the same time, he immediately gave the order to silence them. But little did he expect that these 2 old guys were no pushovers. With just a glance at each other, they had already settled on an escape plan. The sudden act of drawing their guns at each other startled even the mob boss.
Excuse me, but who exactly are you and what is your purpose for being here?
Boys, it's perfectly fine. Everyone, please calm down. Give me those now.
Although both of their pistols were confiscated, the act continued. They completely ignored the mob boss's attempts to stop them and actually started fighting each other. In the end, it took the security staff dragging and pulling to finally get the 2 of them out of the bar. Thanks to their solid acting skills, they successfully regrouped with the young guy and got their hands on that old, outdated pager. Little did they know, however, that their identical model pistols had already caught the attention of the bald henchman. The 3 of them waited for a long time at the fast food restaurant before the pager finally buzzed with a message. Now that they had a specific delivery address, they hurriedly drove out to a warehouse in the suburbs. The young guy went in alone to make the delivery, while George and Pete stayed in the car, just waiting for him to finish so they could finally be done with this whole mess. But before long, a dozen or so burly men gathered at the entrance and, fully armed, stormed inside. The 2 of them immediately sensed trouble and were discussing what to do when bullets shattered the car window. It was the mob boss's men chasing them down. Seeing this, George quickly shifted into reverse and floored the gas, trying to make a getaway, but the enemy's firepower was just too overwhelming. In the end, the car was forced to a stop right then and there. Seeing there was nowhere left to run, George had no choice but to open the trunk. After a countdown from 3, they both made a desperate dash to the back of the car. Amidst a hail of bullets, George calmly removed the spare tire and revealed his secret weapon. Unfortunately, even at this critical moment, they still weren't working together smoothly. Fortunately, having plenty of ammunition, a pistol wouldn't alter the battle. They didn't rush to open fire. They waited for the right time. When they returned to the warehouse, the infighting and betrayal had already ended. The two of them cautiously continued inside, only to be met with the sight of even more bodies. Clearly, the gunfight just now had been extremely brutal, yet no matter how hard they searched, they couldn't find any trace of the young man. Suddenly, the trunk of a car popped open. It turned out the young man had been hiding inside and had narrowly escaped the carnage. The two exchanged a glance. They understood that their job as cleaners was not yet finished. Looking at the young man, George, who was holding the flour, they told him to keep delivering what needed to be delivered. Just put them anywhere. As the young man obediently followed instructions, George chambered a round in his gun. After all, he was supposed to be a corpse already. If George silenced him right here, not only would he complete the rich woman's task, but he could also break free from the drug trade for good. But he also knew very well that this kid was by no means a bad person. After a fierce internal struggle, George ultimately couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger.
It's more realistic.
Pete's shot just now was clearly an endorsement of George's decision. Since the car was totaled, the three of them had no choice but to take the subway home. The young guy, carefree as ever, fell sound asleep, completely oblivious to the life and death situation they'd just been through. And after this farce, the two old guys also felt deeply exhausted, and surprisingly, both got sleepy at the same time.
Teacher.
Perhaps without even realizing it, they were no longer lone wolves, but brothers who had fought side by side through life and death. I'm Bae Guo. See you next time.